for reporting.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It's April 1st, 2024, 7 p.m. And this is the Affordable Housing Committee Project Development Subcommittee, which is a mouthful. The first thing we'll do is take attendance. Krista Nielsen, that's me. I'm here. Hillary Ormond. Here. Bill Perrette is absent. Mike Sweeney and Jane Williams.
Here.
All right. So this is our whole little committee, I think, except minus Bill. So the first thing I thought we should do this evening is talk about what the objectives, make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we're trying to accomplish as the subcommittee. And I mean, I was going to go straight to the Affordable Housing Committee authorizing legislation. And so, you know, if we want to look at that, which I have pulled up on my computer, but I'll read it out loud. Under the section about mission, it says, the committee shall recommend a plan to maintain successive moratoria under subsection I of section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. So I think that's largely our purpose, is to identify a project or projects that help us obtain subsequent moratoria. Guys have other thoughts on what we should be trying to achieve here? Oh, we're in my mouth.
Keep it a little.
Okay, sorry. Let me put it here so that when I'm looking at my computer.
I think that's right. And I think in the immediate term, we should think about whether we want to proceed, assuming that we lose litigation and need to build to the worst case scenario, or whether we want to be a little bit more optimistic and go somewhere in the middle, or the least that we need. I mean, I would err on the side of, you know, maximizing the number of units that we would try to build, and understanding that that's a huge undertaking. But litigation is so risky and you never quite know where that's going to go. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of a risk averse person. So my vote would be that we, at least for now, proceed as if we may not win this lawsuit and plan for, you know, the maximum number of units we would need in that scenario. And then obviously, hopefully that's not the outcome we're dealing with, and we can maybe bank them or back off a little and, you know, do a smaller project or whatever. But other thoughts?
Do you think that precludes looking at possible smaller projects that are a possibility that could be combined with others? Or are we looking solely at this point then at a large opportunity for a large?
So I think it depends on what we come up with. Obviously, I think we're going to have a lot of decision points along the way, and that's part of kind of the next conversation I want to have this evening. But I think that, you know, the easiest, quickest thing would be a single project on a large lot, like find another site as big as a Canaan parish and build the next one. And probably also the most efficient and cost effective in terms of money as well would be to do it that way. As a planner, I don't necessarily think that that's the best way to do it. I understand that's the quickest way. I think that doing multiple smaller projects that fit better into the scale of our town. And honestly, this is another decision point we're going to have that may not be 100% affordable, may have a mixed income component as opposed to 100% affordable. That, to me, that's the more sustainable long-term approach to this. But like I said, that makes it take a lot longer to get to those moratoria. So I think we'll probably have to go into this with an open mind and just see kind of what properties are available and what opportunities they avail us of, and then kind of really choose a path. Did you have something to add, Mr.
Yeah,
Sweeney?
I think my thinking is that from looking at the way the reg is drafted, as well as the interpretation that we heard from Steve Carl and from Deanna primarily, I think we have a directive to move quickly and to try to go for a big chunk play to get a big parcel. We may have the ability as we go along to mix and match, maybe several properties become available. We may tack in a different direction. Or we may, if we do identify a larger property and the litigation goes in our favor, we may be able to bifurcate it and split it, subdivide it, do a condominium or do different approaches where we don't have to build it all out, but we can land bank maybe for the next moratorium. But um, my thinking was to look for something that was comparable to to get the number of units for the for the next moratorium.
To both of your points, it's interesting. There's 5 duplexes that just came on the market on River Street. I think between a couple of them, there's a duplex that's not for sale, which is an interesting thing. But if you look at that, it's 67, 73, 81, 87, and 95 River Street, which would be on town sewer and water, backs up to a wooded area that might be land trust. And then Brushy Ridge Road is above that, so up the hill. They're each 1.075 on the market million. And like opportunities like that seem like such a great thing where we could do maybe, I don't know if you have to deed restrict it when you buy it and we can still let it out to the people that live there, or we want to do a development or wait for the other duplexes to come online. But it would be, in a perfect world, it would be nice to be able to jump on opportunities like that while also looking for, because that's kind of a thin strip of land. I think it's like 0.25 acres each, to find another piece where we could build large and maybe in phases, assuming the lawsuit goes the wrong way and we don't want to have a certificate of occupancy, too soon to qualify for the next moratorium. There's a lot of like little moving pieces. But I do think, to your point, when these kind of properties come online, it's so important for us to consider or float it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd love to see us figure out a solution for how to do that. Administratively, I think it's a little bit of an uphill challenge for government to move so nimbly like that, and to be a player in the marketplace. So I think we're going to have to be creative as we think through options for how that could happen. And I know Maria's here. I don't know how much of that land banking type conversation will be happening in the financing subcommittee, but I imagine that may be an area of overlap between both of us. So we'll just have to keep the lines of conversation open there.
And Maria's also here.
And there's some precedent. I mean, it didn't work out ideally, but when the town purchased the movie theater and did that transaction, it was complicated. I know people weren't happy about having to be landlords, in the town hall, but it did serve a public function, and so there's some precedent for the town being proactive.
Okay, so sorry. My takeaway of our objectives then is to find a project or projects to maintain successive moratoria, and that will go forth assuming the worst outcome in our lawsuit, but obviously hoping for the best outcome, and kind of keep all opportunities open, knowing that a bigger project is probably the most effective and quickest way to go. Smaller projects may be more sustainable, and quite possibly a hybrid approach of big and small would work as well.
Do we remember the worst case scenario, how many units? The bill.
I think it was 70 to 100 was my recollection. And we need 150 hue points.
Right.
So I think it's 70 to 100 units, depending on, the size and the also the income restrictions on them. And that's assuming, again, 100% affordable. All right, so then the third item on the agenda that is probably where we're going to spend most of our time this evening is I want to kind of get a game plan set up. So we just at least have a path that we think we're going down. I've given this some thought and I have some thoughts on the game plan. And what I've realized in my own thinking about it is that it's probably going to be somewhat of an iterative process, meaning like 3 steps forward and then, well, we got to step back and say, does this make sense? Is this big enough? Is this small? What can we do with this? And then move forward again. So when I say a path, I don't necessarily mean a straight line, even though, again, that would be the most efficient way to do this. But my guess is it's probably not a straight line. So with that, do you guys have any thoughts on how you would want to go about this? I don't want to just dominate the meeting and tell you what I would do.
Go ahead.
All right. So at a kind of high level, I think we would need to collect data on basically property in town. And that's the highest level. We could drill down into what that data looks like, but we would need data. And then I think the second step would be to develop evaluation criteria to determine which parcels kind of meet that criteria that we're looking for. And then this isn't necessarily, again, sequential. The third step is maybe somewhere in 1 and 2 as well. But we need to figure out what the preferred unit mix is and what the need is we're trying to address, because obviously the size of the parcel or what we end up building on 1 or more parcels might change depending on the need. If we only need 3-bedroom units, that's less units you can put on a piece of land. So that will change the variables. And then the 4th step would be to assess the development potential of each parcel. The 5th step would be to get public feedback on sort of the potential options that we've narrowed it down to. And I guess in my thinking, I don't see this group. I mean, we may always have a preferred option, like this is hands down the best piece, but I think we should still go forward with a handful of properties. Because again, I think we're just recommending something to the Board of Selectmen. So, maybe we do a cost benefit analysis of each piece of land, but I think we probably should go forward with a couple. And again, because our objective is successive moratoria, knowing that what may or may not work for this next moratorium could work for future. So I think we should do the homework for all of them and then figure out from there.
When you say collect data on property in town, talking town-owned property where it should start, or are we talking private parcels too?
Well, that's a question for us to consider. I mean, in my mind, both are on the table.
Maybe state.
And state,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, any sort of publicly owned land, I think, again, would be quicker in terms of development opportunities. Acquiring land, has its own challenges associated with it. So going to buy things privately, again, requires us to be a player in the marketplace, requires us to be able to make that happen. So I think publicly owned land would be quicker, but again, I think we should keep our eye on the private, what's available on the private market, and, maybe figure out a system to, once we know what our criteria are, to be, have a real estate agent like Maria or somebody like say this, this has hit the market, and just like you would if you were looking for a house, right? Like I want 6 bedrooms, I want 3 bed, whatever you want. And then when those things come on the market, someone's forwarding them to you so that we're not constantly having to reassess everything. We're just getting things fed into it. But I'm open. I mean, I don't have like the answer.
Ideally, I think it's both. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the easiest way is that just happen to be this town is sitting on a piece of property that's ready to go, has infrastructure, is in the precise best part of town that everyone's happy with, but it's a unicorn, so that it's probably not going to happen. But so I think we need to look at our inventory that the town has, but also look at private properties. There may be opportunities even with a conversion with an existing property that has a structure on it. And so I think your outline is good. I think I agree with you completely the way you laid it out. Just another sub point would be, we identify a property, particularly if it's a conversion, we're going to need help in evaluating the property, both as to the point system and how many units we can get there and what the structure would look like. And it's going to fit. And also an evaluation as to the development of the property. And into the cost. So if it was a conversion, developers always tell you that I don't want to be converting a building, although, developers do it all the time. That adds another uh, uh, area to the evaluation because it gets much more expensive when you're converting. Although there may be an opportunity with a property with a building on it that it might work. So I think we're going to need help in uh, consultation and evaluating properties, both as to development and also as to 830G, the point system.
Yeah, to that point, since I know you're representing the housing authority and you've been involved in, Canaan Parish and other things before, one of the things I've told our fearless leader over there, Mr. Goodwin, is that at some point, I think we're going to need some level of a consultant. And I don't know if that's an architect. I mean, and it may be multiple things. It may be an architect, it may be someone that knows financing, but someone that can help us look at these properties and say, okay, here's the potential of this one, or, gee, that one, you can't really get too much on there. That's not really worth pursuing. Like someone that can, I can take us a certain way with my planning background, but at some point it gets more technical than at least I feel I'm equipped, and I don't know.
On the housing authority, we're blessed to have, I see Scott Hobbs, I think I saw us.
I saw him,
based on-
yeah.
Now, we had Scott who, provided that.
Okay.
Help, on the committee, which is invaluable.
Did you guys hire, I mean, I know you had like David McCarthy
We
with the
did,
financing,
yes.
but you must have had an architect. I mean, you must have had a whole team.
We did. We had McCarthy and his company and very skilled at development, not only on housing, but also on development. And he was our consultant. And then we hired architects, we hired surveyors, we hired engineers. And then we looked at the financing. We had help with the banks to determine how we're going to fund it. And the town was very helpful with the soft
Thank you,
costs.
Chair.
Sorry. The town was very helpful with the soft costs that get going, because just with the consultants, it's a pretty big spend just to get to the point where, yeah, I think this is going to work.
And
How
I
do
could, go ahead.
I was just going to ask how we figure out when the right time is to bring on a consultant. Do we need a person to help us sort through what's available in the town, what exists, what?
I mean, I think we might,
Yeah.
again, the one main difference I see between like the Canaan Parish and what we're talking about is, and maybe most developments and what we're talking about is usually a developer, in the case of Canaan Parish, is given a piece of land, like, here's what you have. And in our case, we're kind of sorting through all the pieces of land and saying which one is the best. And so there is no like, here's how you maximize this site. It's like, well, how do I maximize all of these sites, or which site's the best one to maximize? So yeah, I don't know when the right time is, and I'm not exactly sure if this is a single consultant or a group of consultants. So maybe Scott Hobbs or the Housing Authority can advise us, And again, certainly at the first meeting, we're not there yet, I think, but I don't know how soon until we get there.
Yeah, we're probably at a step before the housing authority, because we had the land, we had the Millport properties that we scraped all the old buildings from the late 1950s, and then we had Canaan Parish, which was, so the property was there, we could dive right into development. So, we're a step before that, obviously.
I think there is kind of precedent for this in a not terribly applicable way, but when there was a debate about where to put the new police station, the first selectman had identified, 5 or 8 properties, town properties, and had a consultant come and assess the viability and the traffic and all of that. And it was a high level, it wasn't, but it would be interesting if like a David McCarthy or someone like that if we identify pieces of property first, like let's say we bought 5 duplexes on River Street, what could we put there? Or what should we put there, and how would it meet 830G? Let's say we wanted to develop the lumberyard or the Locust Avenue lot and deck parking or something, so to maximize that, what would that cost be? So I think you're right. I think the first step is sort of going through and identifying land that we think would be potential. Maybe it's I don't know, I'm probably gonna get very mean emails to suggest the mulch pile, but I'm just trying to think of like places, a Talmadge Hill station, maybe starting with a list of that, and then we could ask a consultant or find a consultant that could evaluate each and then come back and say, this is how much this would cost, da, 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 and at least at a high level, even if it's not entirely precise, I think that would be helpful. So I think you're right. I think the first step is really, and maybe at the next meeting, we can start making a list of potential properties that would work.
Yeah, and I mean, to build on what you're saying, as we get down the line closer to, having a short list and making recommendations, I think the ability to have someone at a high level, help us figure out the cost, help us figure out conceptually what it could look like, how many units. It's all very conceptual still at that point, but to have some drawings, to have some numbers, obviously, it's going to help anyone make a decision better than
I
to
mean, if
not.
we find out doing something at the lumberyard at this rate and still providing parking would cost $100 million, we might say, yeah, maybe that's not our best option.
Right.
But I think it's good to know those numbers. It's good to know, is it gonna cost 25 million or is it gonna cost 75 million?
Right.
Because I think too, with some of these in town, I'm just thinking of town properties right now, there is that. The town can generate revenue. And using the train.
And just because I don't want you to be the only one to get the emails, Hillary, I do think it's also important for us not to close off the conversation because of past experiences, even though we may come out exactly the same place, but I think we owe it to the town to say we looked at everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think a fresh set of eyes is, important.
I think as we start to go through inventory, we'll probably have a set of criteria, have infrastructure, location. There's gonna be a Venn diagram, right? So I think we'll have some overlapping, and we'll probably be able to knock a few off right off the bat. Particularly if we have this sort of Damocles hanging over our neck with timing, over the next few years. So, for example, we identify a property, but we're not gonna be able to acquire it for 2 years, then that may change our mind on that property. So I think maybe we'll start checking some off too, once we have, the calculus or the inventory of properties to look at.
Okay, so it sounds like pretty much everyone was on board with the rough path I laid out, which included collect data on both public and private property in town, figure out what our evaluation criteria are, in terms of how we're going to look at them, simultaneously figure out what kind of unit mix or need we're looking to address with the properties, then assess the development potential of each property and ultimately make recommendations. So I was thinking, I mean, this is kind of a combination of item 3 and 4 on the agenda, methodology and also next steps, that maybe tonight we could start to come up with a list of the type of information, data on properties that, that we're looking for. And maybe then before the next meeting, I could work with our GIS group, which is Ty and Bond, to try and I'd love to just get a spreadsheet ultimately is what I'm, and then we'll add columns for the criteria or, whatever information we need to add about each piece of property. So let's have a conversation now about what kind of data sets we're looking for. And then there's no promise I can get any of this, but I'll have to do my best to see what we can come up with. So in an ideal world, what kind of things would you want to see? I guess we first would need a list of all town-owned property.
I probably have that. I'm certain I have a list. I mean, it would be like, included in that list would be like barn at the nature. I can get that.
Okay. And I guess we also discussed state-owned property in town.
Someone mentioned a map that exists that has both town and state property
Okay.
mapped out, but I can find out about that.
Yeah, so if the town has produced a map with that data on it, then it means Ty and Bond, which I'm sure Ty and
Okay,
Bond
so
has
great.
that. So it's just a matter of going to the source and saying, here's the things we want.
Oh, that on a map would be so helpful.
Yeah, it would be. Maybe I dreamed it,
helpful.
but I think it's.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That would be great to have both kind of a Excel spreadsheet
Yeah.
with the addresses, but then also a visual so that we
Yeah.
could start to see. Okay. else do I have on here? This is probably less in the data and more in the valuation criteria, but I think we would want to know what the deed restrictions are on town-owned property, or which properties have deed restrictions that we would need to further research. Right, and parts of Waveney,
Yes.
so I know some of that exists, I just don't have the full picture.
Infrastructure might be another.
Yes,
criteria.
whether it's on sewer and water. Um. I'd put on my list, and this is more now in the private sector, but large parcels that are contiguous or under a single owner. I don't know if this is much of a thing in New Canaan, but other places that I've lived and work, you would look at properties that have foreclosures or tax liens as, low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll get too far with that here, but you never know. I don't know, I mean, now I'm thinking from my planning background, I don't know how much we want to look at, I mean, ultimately, we will have to consider zoning,
Yeah.
right? But I don't know if we want that to be a limiting factor in our initial search, because I think if the town really wanted to do a project, just like with Canaan Parish and just like with Millport, those have special zones in our zoning ordinance. I mean, where there's a will, there is a way. So I don't know if that's a limiting factor right now.
I think I agree with you on that. I mean, the town and its affordable housing regulation is a criteria, but you needed a governor on that. So you had height limitations where you could go maybe to 50 feet, and you had density bonuses. And so if the town was thinking that way, the Planning and Zoning Commission was when you drafted the affordable housing reg. But when it came to the housing authority, it was a blank slate. It was a clean palette. And something was designed and it either passed muster with the Planning and Zoning Commission or it didn't. For example, we didn't park it with 2 spaces per unit, or I think we had 0.9 spaces per unit. So we played around with parking, we played around with density, we played around with height in a manner so that it worked or it didn't work. So probably premature on zoning, I would think maybe right now, but
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if we want to throw this on the list now. This may be something to come back to, but there's a whole conversation to be had about naturally occurring affordable housing. I mean, A, what that even means, and B, if we could identify it, do we want to be looking at that right now and putting it on a list for potential land banking or deed restricting? Or again, maybe that's because this is an iterative process, maybe that's phase 2. If we do, the initial assessment and come up empty-handed, then maybe we start going deeper.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, if let's say we built for the worst case scenario, but we won all of our lawsuits, then I think we can start getting really about
Mm-hmm.
looking for naturally, unless we're really in a crunch, at the time.
No, that might be something we can look at.
I know.
Unfortunately.
Try leaving them on.
Yeah, is there, I don't hear any feedback from leaving
I
it on.
know, and they're not all,
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're probably,
if everybody's on break.
Okay.
all right, so here's what I have for our initial list: town-owned property, state-owned property. Related to those 2, any deed restrictions, whether things are on sewer and water. Private property that's large parcels, contiguous or under the same ownership, and foreclosures and tax liens. I mean, I think that's a good start. I
Mhm.
think as we start to see these things, we may come up with more, but that's a good, I think, initial step.
Mhm.
Okay, well then I am happy to take responsibility of trying to get that information, or, I mean, you may have some of it, but I may be able, let me just
If
see
they
how
can
easy.
pull it,
Yeah, if they
then-
can just literally
Yeah.
export me an Excel spreadsheet, then why
Yeah.
have you spend the time?
Just let me know. I'm sure it's in my email.
Okay.
I'm quite certain I can pull it up somewhere, so.
Okay. Um. So then really that brings us to the next steps and the next meeting date. I mean, we don't have to be done this soon, but we don't have to stay either, but so our next full committee meeting is, I believe, April 15th.
Mhm.
I'm guessing we're probably not gonna get another meeting in between now and then, so I'm thinking we'll probably do maybe 2 weeks after the regular meeting, so, you know, we have a regular meeting middle of the month, then end of the month or beginning of the next month, we'll do another one of these. That,
Yeah, that sounds
Work.
good.
do you guys wanna have like a regular day and time, or is it best that we just sit around and look at our calendars before we leave and figure out the next one? I mean, I could go either way.
Yeah, I think we can figure one out. If we did, we could either do, if Mondays work, Monday, May 6th, or Monday, April 29th, which
Yeah,
the 29th would be.
29th is better for me, because I'm gonna be gone But-
Okay.
okay.
on just one.
But that's, I mean, that's exactly 2 weeks after our last group meeting, so that actually I
Yeah,
think works,
Kind of
right?
works with the schedule.
Does that work for you, Mike?
Sorry, support mechanic.
That's all right.
No problem.
April 29th.
Yes, that works.
Okay. This is 7 an okay time for everyone? All right. Let's plan for April 29th at 7. I will plan to have as much of that data as I can so that we can start. I mean, I'm assuming it'll just be like a working session, right? Like
Yeah.
us looking at it and figuring out where we want to go and what we want to do with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Goodwin,
Maybe taking questions.
well, next on my agenda is public comment. Do you want to be the public or do you want to be?
3 minutes.
Yeah, we're gonna limit you.
Comments are limited to agenda items.
Okay. Mr. Goodwin, what do you want to say?
Great.
We agreed on the
Mhm.
29th at 7.
Great, move on.
All right, so now we're gonna open it to some comment, and first off, we're gonna take the people in the room, which is Chairman John Goodwin and Maria Weingarten.
Thanks. My questions for you, what are the, the questions are popping in my head.
Yeah, I'm the biggest Bob.
Yeah.
Mike, what are the capabilities of the housing authority that potentially they could help us with this process? I mean, are there? The housing authority?
Not really. We have, we have a lawyer, commercial real estate broker, and we just did the best we could, as volunteers on the committee. We lean a lot on Scott because he's a developer.
Okay.
But we brought in consultants and we paid soft costs up front to do it right, just like a developer. And, a lot of the burden would fall on Scott. We helped as much as we could.
Yeah,
But we didn't have expertise on housing.
on staff. So you brought in consultants as
We
you do
did.
them.
We brought in commercial contractors to help us evaluate a property.
Yeah.
Had housing consultants to help us figure out, the point system.
Yeah.
Property and had site planners. We brought in engineers right from the start too, to see that the infrastructure would work.
Yeah.
But again, we were sitting on property, so we had a nice point of departure to begin with.
Yeah.
But no, we hired
Yes,
consultants.
okay. Because I mean, in terms of other areas of town hall, with planning and zoning. They potentially can help us with some assessment. They're obviously aware of properties.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, I did talk through what we just talked through tonight with Sarah, the town planner. And so I'm sure, I mean, she's who I'm gonna go to try and get this information from Ty and Bond. I believe she has to go through DPW to get Ty and Bond's contract is with the Department of Public Works. So,
Okay.
you know, but I mean, I'm sure DPW is a wealth of information on town property and state property as well.
There's the buildings department too, so they might have more information on deed restrictions and things like that.
Yeah.
Various properties.
And then, and actually, in a way, to that point, Hillary, I'm wondering, we've, like a couple of years ago, didn't we do a huge study of all of the town-owned
Mhm.
land? So is that what you were referring to?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we
The
obviously
list of
can
town-
leverage that.
Yep,
Okay.
Was that land or just buildings? Cause I,
both.
Well,
It was town-owned
okay.
buildings and land, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was something like 70 some, but some of them are not
Shed.
usable. Yeah,
Yeah.
shed on the
Yeah.
nature center, like, because of our weird agreement, not a weird, but our interesting agreement with the nature center, which is.
Yeah. And then the reason why, obviously, want Maria here is because, look, my gut tells me we're going to need help sooner than later.
Mhm.
And so then we want to be thinking about, the project side as well as the financing side.
Mhm.
And, so far, like, I think many of you, I've been going through the process of talking to various people. Jane's putting the agenda for mid-month, and I'll be asking this question again. And I think part of the challenge here is finding a cost-effective consultant. And, it's, as you guys were talking about, it's identifying properties, it's then really the project assessment side, and then it's the financing side. So, it just seems to me we gotta try to do that sooner than later, and, I'm sort of networking, I think that's what we all need to do. Is, every time I talk to somebody about what we're up to, anybody who's involved in land use is, or affordable housing is, my next question is, okay, who do you use? So I think
On
we
that
have to,
point, Hillary,
Go ahead.
do you know, or could we find out who the town used for the assessment of all the properties that we looked at for the police station?
I want to say it was. Do you remember that, Maria? Kevin, it was right before we approved the police station. So it was two and a half years ago. It was when I first got on town
Oh.
council, and he did that. He wanted to move it to the softball field, but then he looked at all different properties. So he
Right.
looked at the lumberyard, he looked at the Locust Avenue lot, he looked at, I think there was 10 or 11. He looked at a spot right in front of the high school,
Right.
the softball field. So I can find that study and see who consulted for him. I don't know if it was a police station builder, because there were two police station builders that
I
were.
think it was.
Yeah, it might have been
Okay.
somebody specific, but I'm sure we can find somebody like that for affordable housing, who could do the same sort of analysis. But I found it very helpful to sort of see at a high level the different expenses and how long it would take and what the traffic situation was like. And they had schematics and everything, and I think it was turned around pretty quickly. Once-
maybe we want to get Kevin's input.
But yeah,
Well, and also I think whatever properties were being considered for the
Right.
police station, we'd be remiss to not put those at the top of the list to consider for this as well. I mean, if they were available for that.
Yeah, on our projects, we brought in, pretty early, a good commercial contractor who does consulting work too. So I think we used Turner, and we used AP Construction, companies with good reputations in the area. AP built out Canaan Parish.
and Turner's doing the police station. He did the
The
library.
library, yeah.
Can I ask, when you guys were doing the review and looking at next projects, did you ever analyze any other sites for consideration, or did you guys go right to Canaan Parish?
We went right to Canaan Parish.
Okay.
The Housing Authority we're stymied with the same issue we're talking about now, is that Housing Authority is pretty good with, when we had property to figure it out with the folks on the committee. But we all looked at each other after Canaan Parish and said, what's next? We need to find a property. So it's sort of the same thing.
And then when are we supposed to, because I know we have a couple of litigation matters on 830Gs. So depending on how those go, we're going to have, and who knows when the development is on those if we don't succeed, but there'll be units in those
Mhm.
obviously as well. So that's another thing to consider. And I just don't know what the timing on.
Well, Nick told us, winter of, next year.
I thought that was that for our moratorium related one?
No,
No, the other-
the current moratorium filing, we're expecting for May
May.
22nd,
But the lawsuit related to,
winter of next year.
right, but I'm talking about the 830G projects that are currently in
Weed Street,
litigation.
Hill Street and. the
Correct.
Red Sox
Oh,
building.
those projects.
Because assuming they go forward, there would be affordable units in there.
Correct, 30%.
Yeah.
So that's another thing depending on how those go. And we know that based on percentages of past, there's a 70% likelihood roughly that towns lose is typical. So you have to know
Yeah.
that there might be that might happen as well, which and then kind
Right,
of changes
affects the
our
numbers.
calculus a little bit there
Right.
too.
Right.
Could Sarah do a spreadsheet that I'm sure would drive her crazy, but where it's like best case scenario, we win our moratorium lawsuit, we get the best result in the moratorium lawsuits, and no offense, Arnold, but your lawsuits fail. So that, in the town's mind, that's the town winning their lawsuits, the various lawsuits. But then there's a worst case scenario where, or I don't know if we would put, we want to assume we win, and then that's fewer units we would have available to count towards our moratorium if we won the Weed Street, Hill Street.
I think
I
it's
don't know,
just,
I'm thinking about it in a million different
Yeah.
ways.
I
I'm
just
not
think
gonna-
it's
also
relevant to know
timing,
when
because-
when those might go to court, because
Yeah.
that might definitely change our
Mhm.
interpretation.
Yeah,
And our goal.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we
My,
could
my,
get
I'm
this.
not going to talk about the current litigation,
Mhm.
yeah.
for obvious reasons. But my experience from talking to other people as well as the town's own experience is and we should consult Nick Famonte or somebody on this, but it's very, very open-ended.
Okay. And then the other thing is if we do get that map, which would be great if it existed.
I feel as if it might have been Sarah who mentioned it to me, so.
Okay, so if there is a map, then to overlay just where the sewer and water is, so
Mhm.
Yeah.
that would be great, because then you can really, because I think there's a lot of areas where we may not have that access, even in town, state-owned maybe, might be an issue as well.
Mhm. I think that's right. And it's sort of strange where, I mean, I'm on Lower Brushy Ridge, and I had town sewer and water, and then my neighbors down our lane did not until somebody rebuilt their house, and then they had to get on town sewer and water. But that was only a few years ago. So I, at the top of my lane, had it, but no one down the lane had it until they redid their house. So it is so fascinating where it ends and where it,
Well, in
Yes.
some places you just have sewer, in some
Right.
places you just have water, like you don't always have
That's
both.
true. And I
Yeah.
think that's an issue at Talmadge Hill as well.
Mhm.
And is it an assumption that if it has neither, or it has one and not the other, that we move on for sake of expediency? Or again, is that just a factor? Like it's fewer points for that piece of property and we keep it in the conversation?
Well, it limits your density for
Yeah.
sure. It also limits your financing as well, as we talked about last time, that you're going to be limited as to what you can do for financing on those. But more concerning to me is, I guess, something that we've been looking at state level considerations is that you're going to have an alternative system, and those have histories of failing in neighboring states that are concerning. So you want to be careful about having multiple units.
Well, and they also take up a fair amount of space on a piece of land. So if you're looking to maximize the number of units, having to also have some sort of sewer package system is
Right.
going to take up a lot of land. I don't know if I think we give it less points to your question of, do we dismiss them outright or do we give it less points? Because I think, again, where there's a will, there's a way. If we really wanted to get sewer and water to a piece of land, we may be able to do that if that's something the town wanted to do. But to your point, it's going to take more time.
Right.
It's going to make the process slower. Obviously, the quickest project again is already on sewer and water.
So, going back to the consultant thing, just you got me thinking again, I think what would be helpful to all of us, finance side as well as the project side, is everybody think about what do we need from a consulting perspective?
Mhm.
And, at some point, the entire committee, i.e., with me, will, go and say, okay, here's what we need. potentially here's what it's going to cost, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what would help a lot is let's try to think about exactly what we need, what we're looking for.
And when you say that, you're talking about what skill sets we're looking for, because they may not be, this may not come all in one package, right?
Yeah, yeah, because
So-
the strike,
Yeah.
you're, sorry, Jane, go ahead.
No.
No, I think you're exactly right, as in Mike, or Krista, you two guys coming from different angles, is it seems like this can be a highly specialized industry where you hire the consultant to do this, the consultant to do that. And I think our challenge is, I'm not sure if we want to, hire that one, and I
Right.
feel
Are we gonna-
would be.
Have a whole team already, or
Yeah.
is there one way to do it that we could just go with one firm that has a lot of specialties inside of it?
We can. And we can identify issues too. If we need to hire someone else, we can, but I think someone with just an omnibus, broad background, whether they're a contractor
Yeah.
and
Maybe like
the
an
development
engineering
field.
firm. I don't know. I don't know if it'd be an engineer, but I just feel like, they do a lot of cost, developing costs for project. I mean, they might be able to do some basic stuff for us.
Yeah. A couple of things on the criteria, a couple of other items of criteria. One would be density. The challenge we're going to have is the town-owned open lot, by definition, will create density. I mean, I think one of the positive things about, but I think it is a longer-term strategy of naturally occur for housing, rehab, whatever the right terming is you're not creating as much net density. But we also have to get to that one project. I also think it would be helpful to nail down X of the scenario analysis, nail down what is that number we need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
spreadsheet
'cause
that we
I
talked
I
about.
was talking 65, so clearly I'm off. So we need to nail down that
Right.
number.
I looked back at the notes, it was 70 to 100, you're right.
It is 70 to 100.
That's
I
what.
had
at the
70
last
in my
meeting.
head as the threshold from
Yeah.
prior meetings, but
Okay.
And does somebody have notes, either Sarah or the housing authority have numbers on what are there wait lists for 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms? Do we have enough
Yeah.
1 bedrooms? Because I think that would be,
Good
and what the corresponding hue points are. So if we need all 3 bedrooms and we build all 3 bedrooms, how many hue points does that get us in the?
Well, was it Scott who said that
Um,
there's a lack of demand for 1 bedroom and there's relatively more
one
demand?
bedroom's a problem.
You're having a problem filling them.
It always,
Maybe.
there's always a problem with the one bedrooms.
You could come sit. Do you want, because you want to talk about your role as well?
I just. Well, I may tell you, but I think we talked to our managers of
And just, you're on the board. of
units, they
Canaan
know,
Parish.
Oh.
they know what the
that's why
demand
he's-
is and all, and
Your
they can help.
managers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And do
Good
you know
idea.
what the name of that's a property management company you use, right?
Yeah, well, the property manager is Westmount.
Westmount.
I can get you that contact information.
That'd be great.
And they manage,
Westmont is the manager for the housing authority.
right, and they manage Millport too. then,
Both.
too. They,
Yeah.
okay.
And so do I assume they manage other projects as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're developers too.
And they're developed.
And I'm speaking as a resident at this moment.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, it might be great to have them come to talk to the whole committee.
And I
turn my Absolutely.
I think they could. Very helpful, painting a picture for us.
Yeah, I was gonna put this on you, but we'll put it on Westmount, which is how do we get the housing authority to help us figure out what the need is that we're trying to address, but maybe it is going straight to the property manager.
Every year, the housing authority has to evaluate each of the tenants that they qualify under the different standards, AMI. And it's a real process. Everyone has to be done every year. And there's, the wait list goes through pretty quickly on the 2 and 3 bedrooms, but not on the 1 bedrooms. It's we always have 3 or 4 that are empty.
I did speak to Steve Kleppen.
Okay.
And I think your committee's the right committee, so whenever you guys want, he'd be happy to talk to you guys if of interest, to talk about his thoughts on potential sites within the town. As everybody knows, Steve was the town planner for a long time and advanced a series of ideas over the years, sort of informally and sometimes formally, so he could be a good speaker for you guys.
Really, we've gotta find a piece of property.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Or a couple.
Because it's kind of a chicken or egg question. It's like, how much financing can we get? Well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Well, How
Yeah.
much financing can we get?
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
I'll find out who did the police station
Okay.
analysis,
Mhm.
location analysis. And if it's a police station specific consultant who did that, we'll find somebody that can do it. But I think that would be very helpful in the short term. Maybe at our next meeting, we can pick 10 sites.
Mm-hmm.
With
Yeah.
my mind on the general public also in their role in this, I wonder whether it would be useful somehow in some way to communicate that we're doing this broad search and we'd love suggestions, ideas, if people are, if they know about something or because this is a little different, I think, it's not different than the police station, but it's certainly different from, let's say, the senior housing conversation we had where we need to find a place. And it's not a question of saying it can't go there, therefore it can't exist. So again, I know I'm going to be a broken record on this, but in some way, when it's helpful, I think it'd be great to put the word out so that people can engage in.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a survey that we could send out with Everbridge if Deanna would be amenable to sending it with her newsletter that goes out to the whole town. And it's like, we're welcoming feedback from the public about, I'm sure we'll get a lot of where we don't want it.
Yeah,
And that's fine too,
Yeah.
but it would be, I think that most of the people in this town or most of the people who've been following this issue are very plugged in on the idea that we do need to do something. And so it's going to have to be in somebody's neighborhood or backyard or nearby or somewhere.
Yeah.
And, but people have great ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth, and we can ask Deanna if she would be amenable to.
Well, Deanna had said, and certainly in terms of her newsletter,
Yeah.
she's completely amenable. What I was kicking around was we get through our next regular meeting. And then, I take a shot at drafting something that you all could review. And the objectives would be, I mean, that's a great point. So the original objective was to inform the town, but maybe an objective also was just to put the idea out there. And
Yeah.
get some feedback.
Yeah. Well, then I was thinking as we get further, I hear what you're saying, and I think that's a great idea. And as we get further in the process and we're, maybe whittling down the number of sites we're looking at, obviously all these meetings are public, but having a larger public event where people can kind of see the thought process that's gone into why we've ended up where we've ended up. And we haven't selected one yet, but here's what we're looking at and why that might also be helpful down the road.
There's a radical idea. Do we somehow combine that with a POCD meeting?
No. Not if I want to go to bed that night. But maybe. I mean, if it works out timing wise, I'm not opposed to it. Even though I just said no.
Even though the chairman of your commission specifically asked us to provide written input to the POCD? I'm kidding. Although he did, we know that.
You did.
So one of our objectives is we do our section. Our draft or our section, ultimately, the POCD committee and the entire P and Z will, decide what goes into the POCD, but we did make that commitment to Dan, so.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to timing and where we're gonna be
Yeah.
at the time they need that type of information.
Well, my working assumption is we made the commitment that wherever we are by next fall, we'll provide something. for the
Right,
POCD.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So Maria, how much money are we gonna get?
Lots of options.
I know. Any other public comments? Bob, does anybody on Zoom want to comment?
Have no one with their hand up.
Okay, if anyone on Zoom does want to comment, please raise your hand. Maria, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you guys covered it. I asked a couple of the questions I had, so.
Okay. All right, people
Couple of
on
my,
Zoom.
uh,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A couple of my colleagues on Housing Authority sent me a note when speaking about criteria. Remind me that some other things that we had looked at was proximity to playgrounds.
Yeah.
And also proximity to the train station, because we always had challenges on parking. And we had a push and pull on trying to get more units up, but having fewer parking spaces. And it always helped if we were closer to the train, that we could at least make that argument. Similarly on playgrounds, because, you know, they're children, and we wanted to be mindful of that. And
Mhm.
if we didn't have a lot of green space in the development, if we were near a school or park, that was helpful.
Mhm.
That's very helpful.
Yep, that's great.
Oh, speaking of which, it's probably not going to be applicable to in New Canaan, but in other towns, in terms of looking at potential provision of land, they'll sometimes include nonprofits. Churches, for example, like
Yeah.
my experience where I have another house is the church actually donated land
Mhm.
for an affordable housing
interesting.
project. When you think about it. Objective providing, but I don't know if that'll fit into nonprofits.
I had that on my list too, thinking that, you
Yeah.
know, other places, religious institutions seem to
Yeah.
get very involved in this topic. I mean, I think we can put it on our list of things to look at. I don't know that it'll bear any fruit, but
Yeah, okay.
in the spirit of
Good
leaving
idea.
no stone left
Yeah.
unturned.
I mean, there's that huge, not huge, that parcel of land right next to the Presbyterian church that might be nature center now. That might have been, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
If
I
you drive
can't
on
tell, but
down
something's
O&M,
going on there
it's right on
this
the
minute.
left, and I know there was a strip of land that P and Z, or not P and Z, excuse me, the Nature Center and the Presbyterian Church swapped so that they could have their a memorial. Right, columbarium, that's right. Sorry,
you're
I
right.
remember the name of the columbarium. So, but there is that large, I know it wasn't that
Yeah.
whole piece of land, so it's an option to think about.
Okay.
And under that umbrella.
All right. Well, if we have no,
We have some.
Oh. Mr. Hobbs, do you have some thoughts to share this
Hey, all.
evening?
He's so.
No, I think you all have hit upon a lot of things, which is wonderful. I do think that getting that consultant on board, and I think what you probably need is someone who ends up being sort of at least a project manager type. You know, the biggest expense you're going to have is the construction, and for all intent and purposes, affordable housing is a big apartment building. So
Yep.
if we were able to, as Mike had brought up, you know, possibly talk to AP or Turner or Randy Salvatore or somebody, you know, ideally someone who's not actively doing development in New Canaan, that might be helpful in order to get that general feasibility. And then he can also coordinate the other consultants and talking to the civil engineer, or talking to a lawyer, or talking to, you know, the other folks who are necessary to try to make this work in some way. Because again, it is just trying to get a quick evaluation that, you know, hey, is putting a building on this property, is it going to be 10 million or 15 or 20? And then that helps to sort of evaluate whether or not the land makes sense or not.
Yeah.
Of course, I had other comments, and now, of course, those slid away. I should have had a paper to take some notes and stuff, but I'm sure you guys have them, and we'll follow up. Westmount's the other one that I think was actually a possibility that we could talk to them about becoming our consultant in some way in a paid manner. But having that ability to do that quick evaluation is really important. I don't know whether or not the town wants to actually sign on as with a buyer realtor in order to actively pursue these sort of things and try to bind someone into a deal. Like if you ask for opportunities from the town, I would certainly hope that a lot of them would come in privately as opposed to publicly, because I would not at all be surprised if there's developers out there watching this, and when things come up and say, hey, this would be a great place, we now have competition. There's people that'll go and attempt to compete with us for those same properties.
Good point.
Thank you. Okay.
Just real quick, that also brings me back to town hall though, because for example, and I don't know who's doing what to whom in town hall nowadays, but for example, Joe Zagorensky, he was part of the town hall building project. He was working for, I forget who we were employing at the time. That's how Joe ended up being brought into town hall. So it seems to me we must have some engineering experience in town hall.
Mhm.
I don't know if they can help at all.
Okay. We'll ask around town hall. Any other thoughts before we adjourn this evening? Okay, no, well, if that's the case, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you, Jane.
I'll second.
All right, Hillary seconded and all in favor? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.